We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Granite State Live. We are back with a factory new edition of the program. Still has that new show smell. Love it. I can smell now because my head cold, thank God, is finally starting to break. Great to have you along on this Tuesday evening, the 4th day of January 2025. By the way, 2 days ago, February.
We're getting closer to spring.
The rat saw its shadow. So now we got six more weeks of winter. I am your host, Keith Hansen, the unapologetic contrarian conservative, never apologizing for my toxic white masculinity, heavily armed as always.
I got to come up with something better for Therese. Maybe the audience can help me out. But I'm Therese Baster Ash, here to never let you down.
The Tenacious T.
Tenacious T.
We like that. All right, on the program tonight, your calls, among other things. Call-in number if you'd like to be a part of tonight's program. Toll free, 833-603-TALK. That's 833-603-8255. I know we did have the snafu last week with the calls. I think we are good to go this week.
Got all the
bugs worked out.
Right.
And if you'd like to be a part of the program via video, you can do that as well, too. Participate through the magic of live video. Just send an email to granitestatelive@gmail.com, granitestatelive@gmail.com. Put the words video link in the subject line, and the production team will get that link over to you lickety-split. And, of course, we're always broadcasting on granitegrok.com, but now we're, like, all over the place.
We're spreading.
So now we got granitegrok.com, we've got Getter and Clout Hub, and there's another one, I think. But then, of course, Right America Media. You can always catch that, which is the production team, Right America Media. So you can catch that at it's ramtv.live. That's ramtv.live. And if you want to catch the archives, either on Granite Grok through the X Facebook page, you can also get that at ramtv.live/GSL for Granite State Live.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of crawling, walking, and running with this. This has been a passion and a vision that we've had for New Hampshire for some time, but we will be working on some more graphics, so we'll let you know exactly where you can catch previous sessions or shows and catch us live wherever you are.
So tell us who we have coming up tonight.
So tonight, I named this one, Let's Talk About Life. Everything from abortion to suicide. There was a bunch going on at the State House. We had a 15-week abortion bill. We had a suicide, kind of people being able to opt to end their story as a hospice nurse. I love talking about religion. I love talking about politics, as you all know. And as a hospice nurse, I'm very comfortable talking about death. So those are the 3 taboos in our culture. So tonight we're going to talk about the 3 taboos. And we have a very special guest. We have State Rep Paul Terry, who, if you've never heard Paul speak, he is a very, very powerful, very passionate man. He is a retired pastor. And, I really wanted to have him come on and kind of speak to why is it that we continue to kind of be outnumbered. When you look at some of these things, you think that there would be more of us showing up to be passionate about life and preserving life, and yet we kind of fall on our face when it comes to that. So Pastor Terry, Paul Terry, who is our state rep, who's right there in the thick of it at the State House, He calls it his ministry, being down there doing his civic duties. So he's going to come on the show and kind of give us his perspective from where he sits. I'm excited to have him on.
Sounds good. It sounds like a good program. We're going to do some ranting, and of course, hour number 2, we're going to have some fun too. We're going to address the comments that were made by a certain state representative here in New Hampshire, tone deaf. I'll just say that they were tone deaf comments. Of course, I'm talking about New Hampshire State Representative Weiler, who made some comments about the victims of the YDC situation. So we're going to have there'll be some ranting, of course, because it wouldn't be a good show without ranting. But I think we need to take a look at kind of what the motivations were. Because here's the thing. Some people are really not good at putting their thoughts and what they truly mean into words. And so oftentimes things can get lost in context. So I'm going to play somewhat of a devil's advocate on this.
I'll be interested to see where you go with that one. But, the thing with Ken is he sits as budget chair for the state. And the budget for the state is in great trouble. And right now, tonight, my school district is actually going over their school budget. So it's budget season. So we're going to talk about all of that together in segment 2, because I think it's really interesting. We look at the national level and what Trump is doing. How much fun is this? How much fun is it that he said, USAID, done, cutting it. All that backdoor money, all those backdoor deals to other countries. No, we're taking care of America first. So we're going to take a look at that more at the state level in segment 2. And I think that has to do with some of what Mr. Weiler is worried about.
I think it is. I think it is, and I think it's a fair concern, because the bottom line is that if we wind up spending the entire pot, whatever we have, in terms of settlements and things like that, and I think that's probably one of the big reasons why there was a cover up on this. That this was very slow to come out. It's like, well, let's not
from the beginning.
Let's not kick the hornet's nest too strong, because we may elicit too much.
The impact to the taxpayer.
But, the bottom line is this. Hey, money fixes everything, right? Because if you're hurt, all you have to do is watch daytime television and watch the blood-sucking, parasitic attorneys. Did somebody hurt your feelings? Sue them for everything that they've got. Because money fixes everything.
Well, I'm having that same argument on special education.
Money fixes everything.
We just can't, we're going to spend $1 billion on one child.
Yeah, money fixes everything.
How much is too much?
$27,000 per student. Money fixes everything. Not a problem. That's also one of the reasons why Republicans continue to lose in the grand scheme of things. Because when you talk to the NHGOP, well, we just didn't spend enough money. No, you brainless, feckless morons. It's not because you're not spending enough or too much money. Look, Kelley spent how much was it? $57 million. It was about $150 million that was spent in the race between her and Maggie, not Hassan, but Hassan. Let's give it the emphasis that it needs.
How many people could we honestly help with the money we spend on campaigns? It's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, well, it's all special interest money. But, approximately $52 million was spent. I'm sorry, no, it was more than that. It was about $67 million that was spent by Ayotte's campaign to lose.
Well, not to get completely off track here, just in our opening, but to go back to the YDC Center, the problem that the victims are having is money is not going to fix what happened to them as children. Their biggest thing is they want it to stop overall. Mm-hmm. And we as Republicans, we still have not stepped up to the plate to make certain the children in state custody are safe. And that kind of comes back to having our special guest, Paul Terry, on the show. Where are we as our Constitution, our forefathers said it would never work unless we were dealing with a group of constituents that had morality. So where's the moral leaders that are going to fix things so that we don't find ourselves in billions of dollars of lawsuits?
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about one thing. You talked about politics and death and taxes and all that as being taboo.
Yeah.
Why do you suppose that is?
I don't know if people just don't want to let themselves go down that path, if it's because they can't find a solution to it. I don't know. I love talking about, and as a hospice nurse, one of the first things I do when I go in to pronounce is I say, guys, I'm very comfortable in this topic. You can ask me anything. Nothing is off limits right now. You want to cut a piece of their hair off? You want to save something? You want to do this? You want to do that? It's all fair game. Let's talk about it. But for some reason, we just shut down, and it's because it's controversial. And this is another argument I've had lately on social media. People say, oh, everyone's being so brutal on social media because they would never do that face to face. And what I think it's a great playground for people to tiptoe into areas of discussion that they're afraid or they don't have the skill set to do face to face, and that they can practice and kind of see what the response would be and maybe start to get better at having these difficult discussions and having civil discourse.
I actually like the conversation because whether it's about religion, whether it's about, sometimes even death and afterlife, religion it ties in, government and taxes and politics, because it allows me to see how a person thinks and how they choose to interact with their world. And so, somebody had asked me, and I mentioned, I think we talked about it last week. So I'm 2 weeks fresh married, just got married. My first marriage, I swore that I would never get married, but I found the right person.
She's the right one to get married to.
Absolutely the right one to get married to. So I'm very thankful for that. But it's somebody had asked me once, would you ever date a liberal? Would you ever date a Democrat? And the answer is no. I would not, for the simple reason that the way that a person sees the world politically and socially is a glimpse into who they are and what their soul is, the composition of their soul. Because how you view and interact with politics tells me about how you see your fellow man and what your predominant worldview is. I could not be in a relationship. I don't care how attracted I was to somebody. I don't find somebody that has a worldview that is significant, materially different than what mine is.
I understand what
to
you're
be
saying.
attractive.
I understand what you're saying, but what if they were just kind of surface, kind of landed, thinking that the Democrats were more humanitarians and really never just went deep into it? And then once you start to have that open discussion, they let's face it. There's a meme going around right now that Elon, Tulsi, RFK, and Trump were all Democrats at one point.
Mm-hmm.
You want to watch your liberal friend's head explode right now. You just post that meme out there, right? Because everything's imploding around them, and it's from individuals who have seen the light. I had Coach Reeves was our government teacher in high school, and he made us pick the opposing view on the top 10 social topics: abortion, death penalty, and then on the debate team, we had to debate the opposite point of view of what we wrote down in order to get our grade. Mm-hmm. That taught me that if I don't truly understand why you think the way you think, then I'm not really solid in what I'm thinking yet. Mm-hmm. I have to understand why someone would possibly think differently than I do to truly test where I've landed. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why I like to talk about it. Because if someone feels really strongly in a different way than I do, I want to understand what's caused them to feel that that's right for them, because maybe I'm wrong.
If somebody, and I've said this many times before, that the overwhelming majority of people out there are politically, civically, and economically illiterate.
Yeah.
It's just not something that they've ever, listen, I've been in broadcast media since 2008. So a big part of my job is understanding a lot of these topics, because when I talk about these things on air, I have to be able to take complex issues, break them down into easily digestible, easily understood sound bites, for lack of a better term,
yep.
and then be able to have people arrive at certain conclusions that I'm driving them towards. So that way
I get it.
Cognitive bias causes them to take ownership of that information. They figured it out. They deduced it on their own. Yep. They use their own deductive logic, and as a result of that, they're more likely to attach themselves to it. And that's fantastic.
I had that discussion in regards to the school budget and the special education. They're like, well, they can't find school bus drivers, and they can't find LNAs, and they can't find paras, and they're going to have to go with agencies, so now their budgets are blown. Why can't you find those three entities? Why? Because that entry-level position can't afford to live here, because our property taxes, 70% of it's going to the school that's got this bloated budget with no line items and money being spent all over the place. So now you've just spent your way out of entry-level support for that special ed child, and it comes back to affordable housing. They couldn't make that connection that by spending all this money here, you've outspent the ability for someone to rent an apartment for them to be a para or for them to be a school bus driver. So,
You know, it was interesting. It was interesting. New Hampshire Business Review publication's been around for quite a while. New Hampshire Business Review, back when I was on WNTK and WUVR, Upper Valley, there was a roundtable discussion of stakeholders in the Upper Valley area. So you had Hypotherm, you had Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center, you had Dartmouth College, and a couple of the other, I think Wheelan was there as well, too. There were about 9 stakeholders that were at this roundtable meeting that was facilitated by the New Hampshire Business Review. And what they were talking about was what were the barriers to getting qualified workers, bolstering the workforce here in New Hampshire. Do you know what the 3 barriers were to getting a qualified workforce here? There were 3 identified top barriers to bringing qualified candidates into the Granite State.
I would say housing was one of the 3.
Okay. Number 1, affordable housing. Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center had estimated that just to handle the next foreseeable 5 years worth of staffing, they would need 15,000 individual workforce housing units. 15,000. Now, let me tell you, as somebody who has tried to do residential construction and development up in the Upper Valley, every step of the way, it was like trying to open a restaurant in Claremont. They're not working with you because we want to attract business. They're working every step of the way against you. But I digress. Number 1, workforce housing. Number 2 was lack of adequate broadband and cellular access. And listen, if you've listened to me in broadcast here in New Hampshire, you know one of my biggest rant points is the 13th century cellular infrastructure that we have here in the Granite State. It is garbage. It's garbage because all of the yogurt-flinging, Subaru-driving, silver-haired, hyphenated last name awfuls, angry white female liberals, you know, the women that live with their cats, they don't want cell phone towers. They want windmills. They want windmills. Oh, we got to have green energy, so we got to have windmills. But God forbid you want to put a cell phone tower up so that the rest of us can live, you know, like 13th century. As a matter of fact, the official report in the NHBR said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was along these lines, that 2/3 of New Hampshire had worse cellular infrastructure than rural Thailand.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
That was. Thank you, Juan.
I don't like cell towers, and I actually drove a Subaru here today, so
okay.
You know.
But your last name isn't hyphenated. You're not wearing Birkenstocks, and there's not yogurt being flung around the studio. So
we're okay.
Yeah.
I didn't bring my cat in, but you know, I don't know. I get that. What was the third thing? And
the third thing was lack of adequate public transportation, which, I mean, that makes sense because especially when we're talking about Upper Valley. So, I mean, you're not going to run, buses with any degree of regularity in a cost-effective manner to get people from Grantham or Newport up to Lebanon. It's not New York City. That's just an impossibility. Buy yourself a Subaru.
Yeah. Well, one of the big things we want to talk about there tonight is we've had a lot of people reach out. They were really upset about the fact that we have a Republican majority now at the State House. We still have that a baby can be aborted up to 6 months. We had Katie Patero put forth a piece of legislation with Cornerstone for 15 weeks and wanted to at least do a litmus test on that. And I was watching the support. You can go online and show your support. And we had 900 people who were supporting it, but we had 9,000 that opposed that legislation. And of course, the New Hampshire GOP has kind of wanted to get away from that entire topic altogether because it's a kind of a one vote issue. Mm-hmm. What do they call that? A one topic issue?
Single issue.
Single issue voters.
Yep.
So really just didn't want to go there because in 2 years when we go back to the polls, we're not going to have Trump at the top of the ticket. And they really don't want that to be the only thing everyone's focused on. So they ended up pulling that legislation out.
So you mean that they're actually going to have to stand on their own merit? That they can't have the gravitational pull of Trump carrying them across the finish line?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Just wanted to clarify that. That's all.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of people who are really upset. They really want to preserve life. They feel like the babies have rights and, that life begins at a heartbeat. And so, my answer to that is, well, we're not showing up.
Mm-hmm. We do have to take a very, very quick commercial break. When we come back, Paul Terry is going to join us. He's going to join us via video. Plus, we'll be taking your calls as well, too. 833-603-TALK. That's 833-603-8255. And, of course, if you want to be on video, just send an email, granitestatelive@gmail.com. That's granitestatelive@gmail.com. Just put the words video link, and they'll get that out to you. Much more of Granite State Live coming up right after this, folks. Please don't go away.
I don't think that many kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
He would never try it.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way, my kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping. Maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
Hi, Mom. Where'd you get all this Narcotics Anonymous stuff from?
Mrs. Owens had Narcotics Anonymous come and talk to our class about meetings that can help people stop using drugs.
Narcotics Anonymous?
Yes, please. Can you help me?
Call Narcotics Anonymous. We can help you.
All right, welcome back to the February 4th edition of Granite State Live. I'm your host, Keith Hansen.
And I'm Therese Bastrash.
It's 8-3, I can't talk anymore. I've been talking all day today, so I know for me it's kind of crazy. 833-603-TALK. That's 833-603-8255 if you'd like to be a part of the program. Also, via video link, just send an email to granitestatelive@gmail.com. Put the words video link in the subject line, and the production team will get that sent out to you right away. All right, we have coming up on the program. Why don't you intro him?
So Paul Terry is a state rep here in New Hampshire. He is also a retired pastor. I met Paul Terry. Many of you know that I was arrested for recklessly uttering the word amen at an executive council meeting where they were taking COVID money to document who was and was not vaccinated. And I was new to politics here in New Hampshire, and I got a phone call. I actually had met someone, Dr. Strang, for coffee, and he wanted just to know who I really was. Was I a wackadoodle or was I a real person? And shortly after that, I got an invite to go up to Belknap County Republican Committee meeting with Kevin, and that they were going to do something that was historical. And I didn't know what it was, and I got up there, and they had a resolution, and the resolution was to to basically go around to all the Republican committees and ask the voting members how they felt about a third-party investigation as to what happened on October 13th, the day I was arrested. And that was Paul Terry that kind of spearheaded that. And that night at Belknap, I heard him speak, and I was like, wow, here's a John Wayne. Here is a man who is passionate about what is going on in our country, and when are we going to rise up and start doing the right thing. And I have just been one of his biggest fans ever since in the last 4 years. I've asked him to run for governor. I wish we could clone him and have 100 of him here in New Hampshire, but really respect, Paul in so many ways. And he is at our state house. So thought it would be a great time for him to come on, tell us kind of what's going on right now at the state house. What are the dynamics? What are his thoughts? And, for me, it's just, we got to get out of the pew, guys. We've got to be teaching from the pulpit civic duty, even if that's just grabbing a coffee and going to your local school board meeting and praying for the kids. People say, oh, religion and politics, churches can't talk about politics and religion. Well, no, but we all need to be encouraging those that have morality to be participatory. And so with that, I'd like to have Paul Terry come on and kind of give us his insight and what his thoughts are and what's going on at the State House and how can we motivate our listeners to maybe understand what their role is and their responsibility.
Paul Terry, welcome to Granite State Live. Great to have you on. Thanks for jumping on and joining us.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here, and thank you for the invitation. When I asked how long this was going to be, and Therese told me, I thought, wow, this is a lot of time to fill. And as I've been listening to the two of you, I was thinking I could probably stay on here till 10 or 11 o'clock tonight.
Yeah.
Talk about some of these topics that are important to me and to all of us. Yes, glad to be here.
It's funny when you talk about it because just good organic conversation. It's and one of the things that I've always said, people get nervous when they're going to go on a TV show or they're going to go on a radio broadcast, and I just tell them, listen, pretend like it's just you're sitting down having a cigar and a good conversation. I don't know if you're a cigar guy. I am. So, just sit down, have a good. Teresa's shaking her head now. Now she's a pinch between the teeth and gums kind of girl. So
with my cowboy hat. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting you should say that because over the course of the years, a lot of people are not only intimidated when it comes to such a thing as what we're doing this evening or public speaking, but, as a pastor, I encounter a lot of people who are just petrified to pray out loud in a group. And I would say to them, it's just like you're talking to a friend. And what you really need to do, just close your eyes and imagine you're sitting there at the kitchen table over a cup of coffee, and Jesus is sitting on the other side of the table, and you're chatting. You don't need to use special language and flowery language and special words. Just be yourself, and that's what's great about a format like what we're doing this evening. Yeah.
I would say this to the people who are nervous or who are afraid to do anything else like that. Here's what I would say to you: who cares? Who cares? I speak regularly to and do public addresses. And one of the things that I will do, and I think I brought this up once before, I will have people stand up. And I will say, what I want everybody to do is stand up. I want you to look at the faces in this room. I would like somebody to identify the one person in this room right now who will be standing next to God on Judgment Day being asked their opinion of you by your Creator. That person doesn't exist. So here's my challenge. Other people's opinions don't matter. Somebody is offended by the fact that I'm saying grace at a restaurant with my family. Screw you. That's my right, and I'm going to do that. And I am never going to be ashamed of my Creator because it makes you uncomfortable. Well, you godless heathen.
Yeah. I will say as a hospice nurse, I am there. I worked the last 4 nights. I lost count of how many people I pronounced and how many people I shepherded across the finish line this last weekend. But I have to tell you, in those final moments, it's just you and your spirit and what you wanted or didn't want out of your journey. Nothing else matters. Your love for your loved ones, of course, but it's truly just you. And I think that's why I live my life differently. I told you, Keith, just earlier tonight, our washer machine broke, and I was at the laundromat because I worked the last 4 nights and laundry had gotten away, so I'm going to just go get it all done together. And there was a young mom with her baby who had the TV turned on to worship music in the middle of a public laundromat. And I was short on time. I was late getting here tonight because of it. But I said, nope, I'm going to stop and I'm going to go sing a song with her. And we're going to praise Jesus in the middle of the laundromat together. And it was really cool. And she realized at one moment, she realized who I was and found out that she's going to a church that one of my son's friends goes to. And my son's been asking to go to. So, we have to be bold. We have to be brave. But one of the things I really wanted to be in the message here tonight is once you are aware, you are responsible biblically. So your silence, when something is going wrong and you're aware that something is not okay and it's not right, and you say, well, it's just not my business. I've had 4 occasions now in Loudoun where people have come to me to say the chief of police's brother was raping and molesting, was in the Concord Monitor. And I went to the chief of police and he decided because it was his brother, he wasn't going to do anything about it. That caused a chain reaction of other women to start to come forward. We had someone running for selectman, and I had a person message me that she had been raped and molested by this man. And when these women told me how many people they told in their journey, and not one person went and reported it to the authorities, they were testing the waters. They were testing the waters to see if anyone would believe in them. When you turn your back and you say, that's not my business, that's not for me to deal with, you, in my opinion, become responsible for allowing that evil to continue. Would you agree with that, Pastor?
You asking me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And my mind was wandering a bit. Forgive me.
That's okay. I just feel like we have a society where people feel like, well, it's not mine to deal with, and it is ours to deal with.
Yeah. This is the loss. This is the loss of our Judeo-Christian heritage, which has eroded over the course of my lifetime.
Why do you think that is? What do you think is the driving factor to the erosion of Judeo-Christian values and principles in this country?
Well, I think there are multiple factors that are at work, Keith. I think that if we have read the narrative of the Old Testament, particularly the historical record, over the course of hundreds of years, we're dealing with a people, Israel, who are called God's people for a special purpose. And these people had all kinds of blessings from God, all kinds of advantages. And yet they made the mistake that we make and that all human beings are prone to make. And that is that we fix more upon the gifts than we do the giver. And so when times were good, they forgot God because they were having a really good time. And I don't think it's disputable that the United States has been and continues to be the most affluent nation on the face of the earth. We have been tremendously blessed, materially speaking as well. And what happens is that people are so fixed upon the things of this life that they enjoy, that they become very short-sighted, spiritually and otherwise, and they lose sight of God. And that's exactly what's happened over the course of my lifetime. It's been very sad.
You know, one of the things, and I love Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists, 1802. Because I always love, and as a pastor, you're aware of exegesis and eisegesis. The interpretation, so you have an exegesic interpretation of Scripture and then an eisegesic interpretation. One is based upon an understanding of the traditions and the cultures and the language of the time, and the other is a very subjective interpretation based upon your own biases. My dad was very fond of saying, the devil can quote Scripture to suit his own purpose, and that's exactly what it is. Turn the other cheek, perfect example. Well, Jesus was a pacifist because he said, turn the other cheek. No, if you actually understand what that means, is if you hit me once, I'm going to turn the other cheek and give you the opportunity to do it again. That tests your intent, and at that point, that's when I know I'm justified in drawing my sword and slaying you in the biblical sense. And I love it when people take that interpretive liberty when it comes to the concept of separation of church and state. And reading directly from Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists, I contemplate with reverence that act of the whole of American people which declare that their legislature shall, quote, make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. That means a freedom of religion, because the federal government was not going to establish a national religion a la the British Crown and the Church of England, where people would be free to worship as they saw fit. It was not freedom from religion. It was a freedom of religion. And that's the historical context, not the subjective, oh, well, we're a secular nation. We're not a Christian nation. That's absolute garbage. We are a Christian nation. We're founded on Christian principles. And if you don't like it because you're a godless, satanic, leftist, communist Democrat, well, then you know what? Cry yourself to sleep on your big Bernie Sanders pillow.
Yeah, I mean, my take on
that if I might, that's one really important point to make among several. Another point that I want to make is that over the course of my lifetime, I have experienced a reluctance and even a rejection on the part of pastors during my pastoral career. And by the way, not to be nitpicky, but Teresa, I'm still a pastor. I'm just not being paid by a congregation. Just like a doctor's always a doctor. But you know, I love you anyway. And so,
I'm forgiven.
So where we are is that they say that Christians ought not to be involved in the public square. It's somehow beneath us to be doing this. We have to be loftier and be spiritual, separating life into the sacred and the secular, to the physical. And this is a very Gnostic notion, by the way, which most people wouldn't be aware of. But this separation, when actually Christ is Lord of all, and so Christ is Lord in the heart, in the world of private opinion, in the world of family, but also in the public square. And this is the challenge, and indeed the frustration that I have faced over the years, particularly with colleagues who do not want to get involved personally, do not want to speak boldly to their congregations about the responsibility of their congregations to be involved in the public square. You know, we got a lot of people that come down to the State House to testify on a variety of issues, but we don't hear nearly enough voice from pastors and from those who are faithful followers of Christ and attenders of churches and supporters of their churches in this state. And the argument among several that we hear is that, well, you know, we're just supposed to be subject to the government. That's what Paul writes to us in Romans. Well, my response to that is that that's really all Paul could say. And I don't want to be critical of Paul, perish the thought. But that's really all he could say in the historical context in which he found himself. But ladies and gentlemen, do you know who the government is that we're to be subject to today? It's us.
That's right.
This is this government under which we have looked. What the founders gave us is something that is absolutely unprecedented in the history of humanity. We are the government. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. So therefore, we are the government, and we're the ones that have to be responsible to ourselves. And we can't say, no, that's them, and this is us.
Amen.
But we have, for a whole variety of reasons, pastors, I've heard they don't want to lose their 501c3 status. Well, I thought we were supposed to obey God rather than man. And I would argue with the losing of the 501c3 status. In fact, I'm not really happy with the 501c3 status to begin with. But However, there are those who will also say, I'm not called to that, or I'm not interested in that. And the excuses that are concocted under the rubric of being spiritual are absolutely not only unacceptable, but pitiful.
Thank you. That's why I had you
will. And if you'd like my opinion at some point, just ask me.
That's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because I have had someone just even today say, oh, well, Therese, maybe you just need to wait upon the Lord. You need to pray and wait upon the Lord and not be upset and not get, involved. Don't get yourself in a tither about things, right? And almost like my faith and my walk with Jesus is not strong because I'm passionate and I'm involved. And we'll take this after this commercial break, but I want to come back to this because I really feel we are to be his hands and feet, and we are called to action.
All right, going to take a very, very quick break. Much more Granite State Live coming up right after this. Much more with Paul Terry as well, too. Don't go away.
You don't have to wait for a jail sentence to get help from Narcotics Anonymous. This doesn't have to be your bottom. It is possible to stop using drugs. Call Narcotics Anonymous. We can help you.
If you love them enough to drive an hour to cheer them on as they get beat 11-0 in the rain, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Throw that ball, Diane! Woo! You got this!
I gotta say, that was the coolest graphic I think I've seen. That kudos to the production team on that one. That was awesome. I really like that. Welcome back to Granite State Live on this Tuesday night, the 4th day of February 2025. I'm your host, Keith Hansen.
And I'm Therese Bastarash.
833-603-8255. That's 833-603-TALK if you would like to jump in on the conversation. All right, we're going to jump back over to our guest video line here. We have State Representative Paul Terry joining us. Again, thank you so much for jumping on as well, too.
Sure.
I'm not sure
that I like the Keith. I'm not sure I like that commercial before the last commercial, though.
Which one was that?
I was staring down the barrel of a gun. Did you see that? I thought, wow, that's it was CDC or some CCD, whatever.
Critical Dynamics.
I don't know who your advertiser was, but the gun was pointed straight at me, and I thought, gee, I'm in for it tonight.
So that's just driving home the point. That's all. So, but the critical dynamics thing that teaches you what to do if you are staring down the barrel of the gun.
Go ahead, take your best shot.
So, are you a heavily armed pastor?
I'm sufficiently armed.
Excellent. I like to hear that.
So, we talked about, I know Kelley Potenza wanted to call in. She was really passionate, really upset earlier this evening and talking with Tom Murray. But, the millstone around the neck for children that are being abused. And, we have this situation we're talking about at YDC a little bit. We touched on that with Weiler. But, we still haven't stopped the problem. And, we have individuals. This is what I just cannot get my head wrapped around in the last 3 years. We have individuals that proclaim to be believers, Christian. We're supposed to take care of the orphans. We're supposed to be pillars in our society, stand up for what's moral, what's just, and what's right. And yet we continue to hand the keys to the car over to individuals who want to kill, steal, and destroy humanity.
Well, when you think about it, secular humanism, I mean, this all plays in, right? So I remember pastors down in West Palm Beach, Florida, who were being arrested because they were feeding homeless people in a public square, in a park. So you don't need God, you just need the state. You don't need parents, you don't need a dad, you just need a single mom and the state. And I think this is the dangerous and slippery slope that we have in our society, that everything that the church provided has now been replaced by gifts with the state. Used to be, if you fell on hard times, you would go to your church, and the congregants of your church would rally, they would come together, they would provide for you, and they would provide that safety net.
What do the Amish do? Look at what they do. They come together as a community and they take care of each other. They build barns.
They raise a barn.
Little house on the prairie, Sunday. Put on your Sunday best. Go listen to a sermon and then have a potluck together and talk about who's doing what, who's got what harvest. You know, raise up the children together as a community and in a healthy environment. That's all been stripped away. But even our Christians that go on Sunday, they are just, they're so complacent when it comes to civic duty. Like, even to get a school board, that the school board meeting's tonight at 6 p.m. at the high school, into a church bulletin is like unheard of.
Mm-hmm. Paul, why do you think it is that so many people just don't want to get involved? I mean, we talked about embarrassment. We talked about reluctance to put yourself out there. We don't want people praying in public because it makes other people uncomfortable. What is it that causes well-intentioned people to not get involved and allow the systematic dismantling of our society and our value structure?
Well, now we're speaking to a very broad group of people. Let me start with church-going people for the moment, and then if you'd like to take it out, we can go from there. But specifically, as I'm thinking about church people, I believe a lot of the reason and the fault lies with the leadership. I was talking to a group of pastors several years ago, and just kind of an aside, I said, "Now you all know, what constitutes really good preaching." They kind of stared at me, and they were almost all younger than I am, so I figured they probably knew more than I did, because younger people know more than older people. But anyway, I just made reference to the fact, I said, when you're going to preach a text, you have to do three things. You tell people what the text says, you tell the people what it means, and then you tell them what they need to do. And they stared at me in amazement. And there's what I'm getting to here, is that this is a huge problem in our churches, is that people are going to church and they love singing the music, and then they listen to a sermon, and then they walk out and they say, "Well, Pastor, that was a very nice sermon today. Thank you very much." All right. But they weren't challenged to do anything. They weren't challenged to action. And I always felt it was essential that if we are going to properly understand why God has given us his word and what we're supposed to be doing with it, it's supposed to be shaping our lives, and it's supposed to be motivating us to proper actions. So when we have pastors who are not challenging their congregations as to what they need to do, we're depriving them, without them even knowing it, unfortunately, of something that's absolutely essential. And just as an example for this, I was texting with a guy this past week, and we got into the abortion bill, and he was talking with me about it, and I said, "Now, by the way, in your church, what were you challenged to do by your pastor?" And he said, "Well, we were told that we needed to pray about it." And I said, but down in Concord, we don't just pray about things. In fact, we don't do a lot of praying in Concord. I said, we're there to draft legislation. We're there to protect the lives of the unborn. And, I can pray that I'll be a good husband, but if that's all I'll do, I'm not going to be a good husband. You have to put this into action. You have to show people what it is they want to do. People aren't stupid. But you know what? This is a failure of leadership. Yes, people need leaders, and they're looking for leaders. Our generation is desperate for leadership. And it's one of the reasons, by the way, that President Trump is so popular. One of the many reasons is that because he's a leader, and that's what we need. We have a lot of good pastors out there, colleagues of mine, who are wonderful shepherds. They have wonderful hearts, but they're not leaders.
So,
leadership, quality, and a gift from God.
From a biblical or from a pastoral perspective, let's put it that way.
Yes.
What is it that makes a good leader in a pastor or in a church elder?
You lead people
I
to
think
freedom.
I think that one of the essential elements of being a good leader is being somebody who is willing to live the courage of your convictions and to be willing to call other people to live those convictions that are rooted in the Word of God, not my convictions, not ones that I came up with, but from the Word of God, and that we have to be courageous about that. We have a lot of nice people out there, and a lot of nice people with titles of reverend or pastor, but they're not terribly courageous, or wonderfully courageous, I guess I should say. The lacking of courage, and then giving people a vision. Leaders have to cast a vision. You look at all the great leaders in the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament, Moses and Joshua and others. They were men of vision as well as men of conviction and men of courage, and that's what we're losing. Because in our culture, in our time, everybody's just supposed to be nice.
Is it the church of the lukewarm church that we read about in the Bible? Is that what we've become, the lukewarm? I mean, to me, faith without actions is dead. Prayer is, Lord, show me give me that light onto my path. Show me that next step that I'm to take. And I'm looking for a shepherd. I'm looking for a pastor that's going to lead me to freedom and not into bondage. And sitting in the pew and praying about what is my next action, what is my next step, but then never taking any action whatsoever, to me is leading an entire demographic not only into bondage, but we're letting children be raped and sodomized. We're letting the unborn be killed. We're letting so much slip through our fingers. Our liberty, our freedom, our culture, we're drug-ridden. People are anxiety, depression, suicide, homelessness. There's so much swirling around. And yet to be a convicted, true believer of Jesus, who was absolutely involved in politics, absolutely flipped the tables, was crucified for taking a stand and leading people into action to stand up and say, no, we don't need to be overrun by all these commandments and burdened down. He was here to set the captives free from even, it wasn't just political, but eternal freedom. But at the same time, he stood up and he rose and he went and he did. It was all about action and verb. And I just don't see that in our churches right now. I don't see that in our leadership, in our congregations. And I just, woe to them. I'm worried about these pastors when they go to meet in their final breath their maker, and they were to shepherd this congregation, that that they're going to really have some regrets that they didn't really activate people to be his hands and feet.
One of the things that I've said before, Paul, is that people want to be fought for, but they don't want to fight. People want to be led, but they don't want to lead. And so I think about this, people praying, and what are they praying for? Are they praying to be saved, or are they praying for the wisdom and the guidance and the courage? And this is one of the things I said earlier, stand up and find the person who is in the room who's going to be standing next to you on God and Judgment Day. They're not going to be. So have the courage to be disliked for all the right reasons. Have the courage to stand up, even if you are the only person who is standing up. Therese, you were standing on a street corner by yourself when you started out.
They're praying, God, come fix this. What they fail to realize is that they are his hands and feet. Christ in us, the hope and glory. We are the vessels.
So it's like
we're the vessels to carry out his will. And so when you sit there and you pray, Lord, fix this, he's going to ask you to go do something.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like it's like the, I don't know if you heard the story, I'm not going to call it a parable, but the two people that are drowning and they're praying for God to save them. And so in comes the helicopter and so the one guy gets on the ladder and he says, come on, grab the ladder. No, I'm waiting for God to save me. And so he dies, of course, and he drowns and he goes up and he says, God, I was a faithful servant, all this, and I prayed to you to save me and I drowned. And God says, I sent you the damn helicopter.
I've got one similar. I'm in the woods. A big bear comes running after me. It's going to eat me for lunch. I go to my knees and I say prayer. Lord, let this be a Christian bear. The bear stops and says grace. And then eats me. Yeah, it's just...
Our producer is slow on the sound. There we go.
I mean, but honestly, people, like, how hard is it just to put your school board vote or your town vote in your church bulletin? If we can't even do that, if we're that, it says we are not a spirit of timidity. If we are that timid to assemble and get involved and at least show up at the town meeting and pray and listen and hear what's going on and be a voice of reason, we are handing the keys to the enemy who wants to kill, steal, and destroy us. That's what we've done. And our place where we are in this country got so on the edge of a precipice of complete disaster because of our complacency. And the Lord did hear our prayers and he did save this land. But we've got to own our part of this. Mm-hmm. We've got to own our shit.
Paul, I got to ask you, we've got about 5 minutes left here. So what I want to focus on are things that people can actually do. From the biblical Christian pastor perspective, what are simple things that people can do to try to make a difference in their communities, in their counties, in their state? Simple things that conform to busy schedules.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you should ask that question, because I actually gave a talk at Camp Constitution here up in this neck of the woods, Hal Shurtleff's ministry. I actually gave a talk on this very subject, and I provided very, very a detailed biblical basis for why we should be involved. Not could we be involved, but why we must be involved. Why it is actually a biblical and godly imperative. But also, I gave very practical suggestions, and there was a whole list of things that people could choose from, depending on their life circumstances and their gifts. But at the very least, we started with prayer. Absolutely, anybody can do this at any time. But then I gave practical suggestions such as start attending your select board meetings, start attending your school board meetings. Begin to learn what's going on at the select board meeting, what's going on at the school board meeting. Then actually summon the courage. Go up and introduce yourself to the people who are your elected representatives. Beyond that, invite one or more of them, or maybe all of them over the course of time, to go out and have a cup of coffee with you and get to know them personally. So that if in the future you are moved, which you should be, to express your concern about a matter that's going to be decided at the local level, you can place a phone call to that person, and that person's going to say, yeah, I know who you are. And yeah, we had coffee together. And by the way, our daughters went to different schools together. Whatever it is that helps to bond people together and gives you a platform to be able to be influential. We've got to start connecting with people as well as connecting with God in prayer. And it's not hard to do that. That's just a couple of things I suggested, and I'd share with you. We've got to begin to do that. Don't just go and sign up to run for office and expect that you're going to get elected. Nobody's going to know you. You've got to invest the time to begin to develop relationships with people, get involved in civic organizations, and then people will say, yeah, I know that person. Yeah, when that person came and knocked on my door, I recognized him when he said, hey, I'm running for select board, or I'm running for the school board. And that person will say, yeah, you had coffee with me. I remember when you did that. And hey, when my daughter had an automobile accident and you found out about it, you actually came to the hospital and you actually visited her. These are the kinds of things that are the outworking of the life of Christ. And that's what's going to change the world. People who are full of Christ, overflowing and living that kind of life, and not just standing apart and hoping that things are going to get better.
Wow.
Great advice. And, one of the things that I've said many times, especially during this past election cycle, is that movements involve and actionable movements involve personal connections. You've got to get out. You've got to network. Again, you can't just throw your name on a ballot and think that people are going to vote for you because, they like you. And I mean, unless you're part of the establishment class of the Republican Party, then you get political favors. But no, in all seriousness, you have to make those personal connections because it's personal connections that fuel and drive movements.
And they also build credibility with people, and they get to know who you are. This is my third term in Concord, and I am getting to know more and more reps. But the reps that I have known the longest know that they can talk with me and trust me with their concerns or with their questions, where they can ask my advice on something and not be afraid that I'm going to go and talk behind their backs. This is the kind of really spade work that all of us have to put in our communities and our churches.
Paul, we've got about 30 seconds left here, so I just want to, if people want to find out more about you, any social media links or websites that people can connect with you on?
So feel free to connect with me via email at my state legislative email, paul.terry@gc.nh.gov. That's a new address. We've switched over to new addresses. And the other one is go on to my paulterryfornh.com, and I'll check my email. And if there's something from you, I'll be happy to get back to you.
All right, sounds good. Paul Terry, thank you so much for jumping on the program. Greatly appreciate it. Very, very quick commercial break, folks. Hour number 2 coming up right after this. Don't go away.
My drugs were legal.
My drugs were prescribed.
My drugs came from the liquor store.
From the grocery store.
From the dispensary.
I started it because I needed it.
I wanted to quit using.
I couldn't stop using.
I'm destroying my family.
I lost my family.
Then I found a safe place.
Narcotics Anonymous.
And I stopped and got clean.
I stopped.
I stopped.
You can stop too.
For local meetings in New Hampshire, call 1-888-NA-HELP-U or visit us at www.gsana.org.
We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
Jason, let's go see your room.
How is it? Is it good?
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Granite State Live on this frosty Tuesday evening, the 4th day of February 2025. Great to have you along for the second hour of broadcasting here on GraniteGrock.com, the X channel, the Facebook feed, now on Getter and Cloud Hub, and I think Rumble. It's on Rumble as well, and it's also on Right America Media, RamTV.live.
We're going to have to do a graphic with all the places as we add them.
It's crazy. Try to keep track of everything.
Everyone share it out.
All right. 833-603-8255 if you would like to jump on the program. Again, 833-603-8255. 888-866-8855. And if you want to get on through the video link as well, too, you can do that, just like Paul Terry. He came in on the video link as well, too. GraniteStateLive@gmail.com. Just put the words video link in the subject line, and the production team will get that link out to you right away. We're going to get into some topics. Well, you know what? We might get into some controversy here. But before we do that, we do have a caller, I believe, that's on the line. Rennie, welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
I wanted to call you. Yeah, your statement about being a frosty Tuesday is an understatement, as you well know. But anyway, let me. I appreciate that pastor's perspective on things. I'm Jewish, so you know, I'm thinking on things are a little bit different. But one comment we do have is trying to make the world a better place. Like, I'm walking a battle now. I submitted testimony. The Reach may know about this. There was currently a bill before the legislature about incorporating teaching about the Gazan genocide into the education curriculum, along with the Holocaust. And I submitted testimony on that. I'm hoping the state legislature found it inexpedient to legislate, because that is such a bad precedent, teaching about Israel defending themselves in Gaza versus the extermination of 6 million Jews at Auschwitz.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you for submitting a testimony. And I don't know if our listeners realize this, but right from the click of your computer, it's very easy to go onto the New Hampshire State House, and in the menu drop down, there's a spot where you can go to the committees. From there, you can see the legislation that they're going to be talking about, and it pops open where you can submit your online support. And I'll do a little tutorial for people on that. If you wish, just reach out to me. But you can go ahead and submit. And what I've heard from the State House reps is for every one person that submits either support or opposition or submits a Word document with their opinion on the matter, they count you as 1,000 voters. Because they know behind each person that reaches out to them, there's about 1,000 that are like-minded. They're not used to hearing from citizens. So when you don't think that you matter, you do. You actually have a lot of weight and a lot of pull. And they're constitutionally, they're supposed to represent the people. So the people that know about this, the people that know that they can submit their opinion, we are so blessed here in New Hampshire that we can be so participatory in the government process, and yet we don't take advantage of it. We don't do it. So kudos to you for submitting your testimony, especially with your, your heritage.
Yeah, but that bill was a blindside. That came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they throw all kinds of mud at the walls this time of year. It's really hard to really sift through it all. And sometimes I wait until it's gone to the other side. So when it's gone from the House over to the Senate, once it's past the House, then I start to pay attention. And that's when I tend to go down to the State House and start, doing my testimony on things. Only because there's going to be a lot that will be weeded out, that will be tabled. And we only have a gallon of gas left in the tank. You got to figure out where you're going to spend it, right? But for those of you who are paying attention and tracking to the legislation and weighing in on it and going down to the State House, you do matter. You matter quite a bit. And good for you for exercising your civic duty.
Rennie, thank you very much for the call. Appreciate it. And again, it's very simply getting involved. Find something that you're passionate about and get involved. Offer that testimony. If there's public comment, make a public comment. It's critical that people get involved, and you have to let your voice be heard.
And right here on the air, I'm going to invite anyone who's listening who has never been inside of the State House, and you haven't done that, I will personally meet up with you and take you for a tour of the State House. I do not want you to be intimidated going into the people's house. In fact, I've said to people, we should go in with our slippers, because that is our house. My dad taught me at a very early age, we are the government. Paul Terry said that in the last segment. We are the government. We need to be in there, and we need to be comfortable going in there. So, if you want someone to walk through Flags Hall with you and show you some of the chambers and where they talk and how they meet and what to expect, and you just don't want to go alone your first time, I will go with you. And not only that, we'll go down to the cafeteria afterwards and have lunch together.
But
Because it's that
please don't wear your
important.
slippers, because we don't want to turn the State House into a Walmart where people
No.
show up in pajama pants and.
No, but people really should be comfortable going down and watching and seeing the process and how it works, and even bring your children. It's a really important thing, I think, for all of us to be really comfortable with.
I'm going to jump over to the caller line. Bill from Seabrook, welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Oh, not too much. Well, I was actually talking with Therese earlier. How's it going, Therese?
Hi, Bill. Thank you so much for calling in. You're doing great work out there on the Seacoast. You're also very passionate about believers getting involved, and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing out there on the Seacoast, Bill.
Absolutely. I've been following you ever since 2020. I'm a very big supporter of what you're doing. I very much appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the great work. So a little bit about myself. One of the things that I've been working on lately in the last several months is I've actually been starting a nonprofit on the Seacoast in Hampton. It's called One Accord Studios. So it's kind of a play on words of like the one accord of the disciples from the Bible when they all came together. And so the whole idea is that it's a nonprofit community music studio. So it's trying to produce faith-inspired, positive, family-friendly content, whether it's video or music, for the community. One of the tough things, whether it's in politics, public life, it doesn't matter where, we have a lot of lack of guidance sometimes in New Hampshire. And one of the best ways that we can find guidance is to come together, look to faith, look to God, and be able
Build
to
those
find a community.
relationships.
Absolutely. And what's one of the best ways to do that is to unify through the universal language of music. It's something that we all kind of understand. It doesn't have to be complicated. I'm trying to really help reach out to some of the younger folks in the community, give them something fun to do. Not everybody likes sports. Music's an awesome way to learn and be able to cultivate faith, be able to cultivate community, and more importantly, just like be able to learn some stuff about each other and learn about life. So I'm trying to work on that right now, and I know that a lot of folks in the community are going to be able to benefit from this. And, you know, I still have a daytime job working, but for me, this is a labor of love. I think that we all need to do more of this, whether it's getting involved at the State House, reaching out to your local representatives. This is just a different way to get involved. We all need to find our way to be community activists.
In business management, I was taught long ago, if you find something that someone is passionate about and you put them into that role, they don't get burnt out. So everyone's going to be different, every listener. But if you take your hobby, you take your passion, Bill, I think you're an engineer, but your hobby and your passion is music. So you decide, okay, I can build a studio. I can make it accessible to homeschool families. I can bring the community together. I can do something positive with it, and I can use it for civic duty. That is what each of us needs to challenge ourselves with. What is the thing that I enjoy doing, and how could I use it to better our society, our communities, our government? And kudos to you, Bill. And I know Keith and I have talked about come summertime and the spring weather going around the state. So maybe you will be our point of contact out there on the Seacoast, where we go live and have a live studio audience and take questions and do a real roundtable on topics that matter to people. But thank you for bringing your community together, and thank you for calling in.
Thanks so much, Bill. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Much appreciated, guys.
All right. God bless. Be well. All right, we're going to get into a little bit more of a hot button topic here. I want to pull a graphic up on the screen if I could. This is courtesy of New Hampshire Journal. This is State Representative Ken Weiler, Republican out of Kingston, who said regarding the DCYF abuse victims and the lawsuit settlement fund, quote, "We can't break the budget with this ridiculousness for people who haven't obeyed the rules, and oh, you're rewarded. Rewarded for what? A misspent life? It just doesn't make sense to me that someone who got abused others, and abused themselves should be rewarded, and that's the way it looks. And someone on the street says, why DC? I'll just say they abused me, and I'll become a millionaire. This is an example of what we're setting. Or this is the example we're setting. So I did invite Ken. I spoke to Ken yesterday morning, and unfortunately he had a previous engagement. It wasn't, and I will say this, he was very, very willing to come on the program, just with a previous engagement. Wasn't something that he was going to be able to manage tonight. And I said, listen, I'll give you a fair shake. I'm not going to attack you on this. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Because I think oftentimes people can say things And some people are just not good at expressing themselves, taking their thoughts, putting them into words. Sometimes things get lost in translation, in context. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying I'll give you a fair shake. So I'm not going to automatically go on the attack.
Well, I did.
Yes. And there were several other people who did as well, too. In fact, we're going to have one of those people who's going to come on the phone here in just a minute. I know she's on hold. But so what are your thoughts on this?
Well, right away I'm very connected with a lot of the victims. And, but people don't understand they're shaping this narrative that the children that were at the YDC Center were people that held people up at gunpoint and stole their cars or, raped somebody and they just happened to be under 18. No, it was the overflow for children going into state custody that we didn't have foster home placement. We had 5 and 6-year-olds going to the Sununu Center. I had one of the victims who was just recently on the news, his whole case being, dealt with, and he was CHENSed, which means goes into state custody.
Child in need of supervision is the acronym.
So too much for his mom to handle. Mom says help. He had simply put his hand through a wall. He was frustrated at school, put his fist through a wall. His mom didn't know what to do with the behaviors in the school. He ended up being CHENSed and ended up at the Sununu Center, ended up being raped and molested, and verifiably. So that is not a misspent life. You don't take a 5-year-old who grows up in the system, who's traumatized, bounced around from foster home to foster home to foster home, who ends up, combative because they don't trust that anyone's truly ever going to love them, and put them into an environment with predators, and then say, oh, it was a misspent life. Who says that? That was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I called Ken myself right away the next day. I said, Ken, I understand the state budget with the COVID money going away, with the federal money going away, with inflation, the pension funds a train wreck. Our state budget, guys, is in huge, it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be very lucky if we come out in 2 years with the Republicans on top, because the budget is a hot mess. And he is the chair of the finance committee. So he's under a lot of pressure to figure out this budget. And now you've got all these lawsuits coming through as well, which I do believe that is the only rational reason I can think of that all of these individuals who clearly knew this abuse was going on. Mind you go back to Meehan, he was awarded $18 million, but another $20 million because the evidence was so strong that everyone did know that this abuse was happening, and they stayed silent on it for another decade. That's enough. Who's going to pay for that? Who pays for that? We do, the taxpayers, right? So I get that Ken's stressed out about the budget and all these lawsuits, and it's endless, and now anyone could technically jump on the bandwagon, and I'm sure some may. But you've got legitimate children that were abused. But the kicker for me is we still haven't done it. And this is what when I called Ken, I said, Ken, more than money, do you know what I hear from the victims? They want us to put a mechanism in place to make sure it doesn't continue. And we still have yet to do that.
One of the things that Ken mentioned to me when I spoke to him yesterday was the concern that now there are multi-million-dollar payouts. And again, I'm not defending. I'm just, he's not here, so I'm just relaying what I had him say to me yesterday. The concern is that, instead of giving out multi-million-dollar payouts for each individual, that there can be some degree of financial compensation, but wouldn't it be smarter to create a slush fund that would pay for counseling and support services and things like that for the victims of these crimes? And I think it's an interesting concept. I mean, what are the costs associated with trying to, I don't want to say rehab, but in order trying to make these people whole? I mean, something was taken away from them, no question about it. Listen, I've been very open about this. I was sexually abused when I was 8 years old by a trusted adult. It wasn't a family member, but it was a trusted adult. Something was taken away from me. I never sought financial compensation. I dealt with it, and life goes on. Everything is okay. But there are some people that aren't as resilient, and especially when it comes to, and it also depends, I think, a lot on the degree of the abuse. Rape, that's a very, very traumatic thing, especially for a child. And now if that starts to happen multiple times, now we have the compounding of those physical traumas, those emotional traumas. That can take a lifetime to try to recover from. What do we do to make that person whole? How can we make that person whole? Can we make that person whole? And is money the best way to do that? Because the bottom line is we don't have a bottomless pool of cash in this state.
Well, I think we need to start with one, not calling it a conspiracy theory. That's what Kelley Ayotte did in her debate with Chuck Morse. So you're re-victimizing the victims over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a victim to say, you know what, we hear you. We believe that it did happen. There's evidence that it happened. And we are so sorry. And we want to put together a team to make certain it doesn't continue to happen. If we did that tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
if we started a crew, Ken and the State House to say, you know what, we're going to acknowledge NHPR, they have a podcast on the YDC abuse podcast. If you haven't clicked on that, you need to click on that because they have a graphic and it shows the volume of children that were, it's just, they've done a really good job documenting and interviewing the victims. And when you listen to that, it's undeniable that it happened. And so we've got to at least acknowledge that it happened. We've got to put a mechanism. We need to say, we're sorry. We're sorry that this happened to you. We're sorry that no one listened to you. We're sorry that you were brainwashed to believe that no one would listen to you.
Going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by New Hampshire State Representative representing the 19th District Stafford, Kelley Potenza, when Granite State Live continues. Don't go away.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt accomplished, made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
You don't have to wait for a jail sentence to get help from Narcotics Anonymous. This doesn't have to be your bottom. It is possible to stop using drugs. Call Narcotics Anonymous. We can help you.
Jason, let's go see your room.
No, that's not right. How was it? Is it good?
Welcome back to Granite State Live, broadcasting, of course, on Getter and Rumble and Twitch, and it's all over the place, including GraniteGrock.com, which has been shaking up politics and keeping politicians on their toes for nearly 2 decades, and they are just getting started. Launched in 2006, and the Grok has grown from New Hampshire's top conservative blog into the leading voice for political news, commentary, and analysis across New England. Now it's become the go-to destination for conservatives in Vermont, Maine, and beyond, with readers and interactions from around the globe. And exciting news, after they revamped the entire website over the summer, GraniteGrok.com is now cleaner, faster, and easier to navigate with fewer ads and a streamlined way to find the content that matters most to you. Best of all, they've brought back the live local podcasts from activists and video programming, just like the one that you're watching right now, Granite State Live. If you have something to say, the Grok has made it easier than ever to get your op-eds and press release published on GraniteGrok.com. You can send them over to Steve McDonald at steve@GraniteGrok.com. Again, that's steve@GraniteGrok.com, and they will get that up. And if you believe in supporting independent journalism, you can always make a contribution via the donation link at the bottom of every page on the website. And that's what I personally like about GraniteGrok.com, is that they are beholden to the readers and the viewers, not to the politicians and not to the special interest groups. That means that they put principles over politics, and that's important. So don't wait. Bookmark GraniteGrok.com today. Follow them on X and Facebook to stay up to date. That is GraniteGrok.com.
Do you know what I love most about Granite Grok? Is their magnifying glass. I go in there when I find a name that I haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
I go in and I put the name in there, and all these articles come up, and I instantly have a little bit of a working knowledge as to who this legislator is or who this politician. So,
and
great resource.
They did a hit piece on me years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, it's equal opportunity. I got to be honest with you. So again, I mean, truly, I think that they are objective. And you know, I mean, it's principles over politics, and that's what's super important. All right, joining us on the caller line right now is Kelley Potenza, Republican state representative serving Stratford's 19th district. Kelley, great to have you on the program.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I asked you to call in earlier because you were. I know you were. I walked into a room and you were on the phone call with on the phone on speakerphone with somebody else, and I said, "Man, you know what? If there is one person that is, if I can say in a nice way, filled with piss and vinegar, it is Kelley Potenza." And I know the state rep Weiler comments. I know you took great offense at those. Tell me what your thoughts are on that first and foremost.
So, one, I was horrified. So right when I found out, I immediately started to text people that are in leadership positions in our legislature and ask what is going to be done. I didn't get any answers. So then I went directly on X and posted, Weiler needs to be removed from House Finance immediately. This is abhorrent and disgusting. What an absolute disgrace for him to be a New Hampshire state representative. And then I tagged New Hampshire GOP, New Hampshire House GOP, the Speaker, Majority Leader, New Hampshire Journal, New Hampshire Bulletin, NHPR, WMUR, Adam Sexton, Kevin Lenjamin, everyone. So I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I came from being an activist, so I was always loud and bold and all of that. And, people had problems with me, of course, because of that reason. Same thing kind of falls in Teresa's lap as well. And because when you go against, the grain, but if the grain is doing something wrong, that is the only way we're ever going to be able to move forward, is you hold people accountable when you're in government, when you're in politics or in leadership positions. You've got to hold bad actors accountable. And that's how people feel like you have their back. And we're in a place now where everything should be working. We should be firing from all angles here. We've got a supermajority in the Senate. We have 222, I believe it is, in the House, compared to, I think, 178 or 177 in regards with the Democrats. We should be getting all of these things done. We've got a Republican governor, but we can't get out of our own way, because when people do bad things, we've got to hold them accountable. This is a leading person in a finance role that has been in this role for several years, and we're not. He should be stripped. We have a lot of other very educated people in the House that could, that can be there on finance. The budget is a dumpster fire. I'll get to that in a second. But, what are we doing? If we don't take action, when Democrat does a bad thing, same thing, House rep, we should be doing something. We should call them out. They should be censored. Something should happen. The same exact thing should happen on our side. But we don't. And then it just looks like we've got feckless, weak leadership. And I'm just tired of it. And I know intimately a little bit more about this situation than other people.
Right.
Because he said these things directly, not just to me, but to a couple of other people. So the cat's out of the bag now. He couldn't even hold it in, and he does that. Oh my gosh, in front of the Chief Justice, right? Wasn't it in front of Gordon McDonald of the New Hampshire Supreme Court? Yeah. I mean, what an absolute embarrassment.
I can't even imagine these victims and how much the Republican Party has just whack-a-moled them over and over again since September. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, I do not even want to put my name. I am probably the most Republican in the state of New Hampshire. And yet our party has called it a conspiracy theory, has a misspent life. Have any of these individuals actually sat and watched the trial and the evidence? And yes, I do agree that the reason that this has been hushed and hushed and hushed is the liability to the taxpayers enough to bankrupt the state. It truly is. But, and for your comment of, well, maybe we just provide them counseling. These are individuals that we're told no one will ever believe you. They went into self-medication. They went into different coping skills. They've lived homeless. Some of them have lost their lives. We had one that went home with one of the guards, and the guard was able to adopt him. He shot the guard in hopes that he could have a life in prison over being raped every night by that man. That man's father was a police chief.
Story. That's horrible. I know.
I mean, these stories are bad. Story. The stories of everyone get naked, throw them in a room together, and whoever knocks each other out, the ones that aren't passed out on the floor, they get to go back to their rooms. The ones that are passed out, that you just beat up, we're going to rape and sodomize them. Those were some of the games they played. And we're going to call it a misspent life?
Yeah.
What is wrong with us? That is not okay.
I know.
One question that comes up, I mean,
oh, go ahead.
One question that comes up all the time is, I mean, of course, when you are, I mean, even churches, we were just talking to a pastor. So if somebody wants to be, maybe a Sunday school, they want to teach Sunday school, or they want to be a babysitter at the church so the parents can go in and worship and not have to worry about the child, then there are extensive background checks, Corey checks, things like that. I know, and I had mentioned last week, I was the director of a residential facility, so right. I know what the background check was for the individuals that were applying for that job. But when we go back to when these issues were issues at the YDC, what was the extent of the background check that was being conducted on prospective employees, if any, to ensure that these people didn't necessarily have backgrounds? And of course, like a financial investment, past performance is not indicative of future performance. You can't foretell what somebody is going to do. You can only use the background to say, okay, well, this person has a propensity for this, or we wouldn't want to have a person who is convicted of a sex offense or a child rape or anything like that in a position of trust over children.
So the state outsources a lot of this, right? In your case, it was an outsourced residential home.
Yes.
Right? And whether you had background checks back then or not, I don't know. But I will tell you, I have a nurse that took a contract position at the Sununu Center in the last 12 months. And she was in there and she saw one of the guards on top of one of the children. There's still children there. On top of one of the children, she was like, he's not breathing. She thought she was going to witness the death of this child. She started screaming. She left her assignment. She looked up that guard's name, who was there on a hiring agency filled position, looked his name up, and he had been convicted of a sexual crime of a minor. That was in the last 12 months. The perpetrators go where the children are.
Of course.
We still have a problem.
And usually they don't have a record, though. Usually these things happen. They're happening behind closed doors, within families, close-knit friends. I mean, over 90% of all these cases are that it's the trusted adult. It could be someone in the school system. It could be someone, the babysitter. It could be, of course, we have a lot of uncles and aunts, brothers, sisters. It happens. It's rampant everywhere. And, it's a good thing about the media and all that kind of stuff because it comes out now. I mean, before, these things were always buried. And the amount of stories that we know is crazy. I'm going to age myself right now. I grew up in Manchester, so I can speak to YDC better than anybody else. I knew exactly everything about it. My family has a business in Manchester that my brother has taken over. My dad was in Manchester since 1969 is when his business started. So I grew up there. I'm going to be 52 years old, and everybody knew about YDC. Everybody knew that, oh my gosh, if you do something wrong, you could go there. It was like a running joke. So there was a very good friend of mine. I went to Memorial High School. He went to Central, and he was a little bit of a derelict or whatever you want to call it. He basically got sent to YDC. He had a single mom, and that was probably why, because he's a single parent. But it was really for truancy. So he basically skipped school, and he got sent there. And I can't even begin to tell you. I know he's one of the cases, and his life at that point is over.
NHPR has done a YDC podcast and done a tremendous job of interviewing anyone who has claimed to be a victim. And you listen to those and you try to be objective and listen like Ken would to say, no, these are just people after a settlement dollar amount, but they're not. They truly aren't. And you listen to that, and YDC podcast says this is the largest child sex scandal in the nation perpetrated by state employees. That's huge. This is bigger than the Catholic Church issue. And it is enough to bankrupt the state. But you know what? We've got to deal with it.
It is, but nothing was done right. Nothing's ever done right in the legislature.
And we're continuing to do wrong.
Correct. So, yeah, we put this fund together. I think it first started as $100 million. Now it's, I don't even know, 125, 150, whatever the amount is.
Sign the dotted line. We'll give you a check.
The lawyers are grifting off the system. So let's just say if this was all done the right way, there should have been an outside counsel that was handling this completely, out of state, whatever, a grand jury type entity that was handling all of this stuff, where they're gathering evidence, gathering all the witnesses, doing all of the due diligence on this, making every single case. This should never have been with our attorney general, never. And the problem with this whole thing is now you've got it, doled out between three lawyers that are just fishing for more cases, fishing, because they're getting a cut. They're all getting a cut on that money. That's not how it should work. It should have been a completely separate entity.
And that was, and I will say, in my conversation with Representative Weiler yesterday morning, that was one of his concerns, was that all of this money, a significant portion of this is going to wind up going to the attorneys, not to the victims, which is one of the reasons he said, listen, I would be much more in favor of setting up a fund that these victims could draw from for their needs, as opposed to just handing them blank checks, which then, of course, is going to wind up being eaten up by attorneys and attorney fees. So from that perspective, I can understand that argument.
We continue to make mistake after mistake after mistake with this, and it's still continuing. And in the end, it's children that are going to be harmed, and it's the taxpayer.
Well, that makes sense why we would make mistakes, right? Because, we royally screwed this thing up. So let's do whatever we have to do to make this a non-issue as quickly as possible. Let's get this under the proverbial rug, because this is a stain. This is a stain on Her Highness Kelley Ayotte, who called this a conspiracy theory. This is a stain on Her Highness Kelley Ayotte, who was the Attorney General when the vast majority of these rapes and sexual assaults were occurring. So let's call a spade a spade. This is, let's get this out of the headlines as quickly as possible. Yep. And how do we make the problem go away? Money.
But we continue to let it happen. And I'm here to say, Kelley, if you're out there, if someone can get the message to Kelley, mom to mom, if you want to sit down and figure out a mechanism to make certain New Hampshire children are safe from tomorrow forward that there's audits, there's oversight, there's background checks, and that you take all these cases and everything that's happened to these victims, and you get all the attorneys out of their hand in the cookie jar, and you take what we can, and you try and say, hey, we will sign a check here. We cannot make up for what has happened. We can make sure it doesn't happen to children going forward. Or you can take it in front of a jury and see what a jury decides to award you. And you know what? We're just going to have to eat it as taxpayers. But you know what? There needs to be accountability. And you know what? We're making those settlements worse. It's only going to get worse and worse when
I agree.
when we say it's a misspent life, or that, they abused people and they were abusers, so they deserve to be abused. It was a conspiracy theory. All this bullshit has to stop. We need a resolution to fix it from happening, and we need to tell the victims we're sorry, because we keep re-victimizing them. And you know what? A jury is not going to look fond on that.
So we always talk about coming up with solutions. Kelley, what do you see as a common sense, realistic, and I mean, I'm going to say affordable solution to this? I mean, I understand that oftentimes judgments are punitive in nature. You have compensatory damages and you have punitive damages that are designed to punish. So how much of this should be compensatory and how much of this should be punitive? Because the state ultimately is the one that screwed the pooch here.
And Kelley, before you go there, you know what the other thing the victims want? They want these people behind bars.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, much more of this conversation plus your calls when Granite State Live continues. 833-603-8255. That's 833-603-TALK. Much more coming up after this quick commercial break. Don't go away.
I don't think that many kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
He would never try it.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way, my kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping. Maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
Jason, let's go see your room.
No, that's not right. How was it? Is it good?
Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of, we're on Tuesdays, so I can't say it's the Tuesday edition as opposed to the Wednesday edition. Although maybe we should take this 5 days a week.
I feel like we need to give a platform for the victims. I just had one text me, simply put his hand through drywall in high school, frustrated, upset, angry. Mom didn't know what to do. Sent him over for supervision, found himself in the Sununu Center. I mean, the families, these stories, it's not just the victim. It's all of their families and all of their friends. I mean, everyone in New Hampshire seems to know somebody who was impacted by this.
I had brought this up many times on my morning drive show that I did. I had a lot of parents who would call me. They knew what my background was in terms of running facilities, and I've run juvenile impact incarceration programs, literally juvenile boot camp programs for sheriff's departments and state police, running a residential program here in the state of New Hampshire. So I would have parents that would call me and they would say, "Hey, what can I do? My kid's out of control. What can I do?" And here's the one thing, and I'm going to speak directly right now. If you're a parent and you have a child that you're just at wit's end in, whatever you have to do, and I know it's hard, and I know it's hell, and that child is putting you through hell. But here's the one thing, and I am going to ask you. Don't ever allow the state to take control of your child, to have custody of your child. You fight it, and you fight it with everything that you have, because I'm telling you, I have seen this happen more times than I care to count. If you lose custody of your child to the state, you will never get your child back. Literally, that child will come back to you a different human being. And figuratively, well, I should say figuratively, they're going to come back to you as a different human being. Literally, you are unlikely to get that child back because they are money to the state, and they are money to the private entities like Spalding, like Mount Prospect Academy and Beckett and all of these facilities that are warehouses for kids. They make money hand over fist, and the care and the education that these kids are getting is absolute garbage. Garbage. Don't ever let the state get control of your children. You will not get them back.
I had someone send me pictures from Spalding's Facebook page where they did a prom, and they cross-dressed the children. They took children that were so cognitively impaired and delayed and dressed them up, and they were sitting with these adults in ways that were just the pictures alone spoke 1,000 words. And I just posted a collage of the pictures, and everyone at Spalding got upset with me, but it was someone that worked at Spalding that said, you need to come look at this. Mm-hmm. We got to get these kids out of state care. The ones that don't have a mom, maybe mom's overdosed and dad's in jail, and they're being bounced around from place to place, to foster family, that there's predators all over. We need to rescue our children here in New Hampshire. It's a real thing. Kelley, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. You guys are taking it on. So
I'm just hoping our legislators can pass some sort of legislation that allows for there to be an independent audit of these facilities that we contract with. We're spending $500 a day for these children to be in state care, and yet there's no way to have any sort of oversight to make certain these children are safe.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I want to answer Keith's question that he posed before the break, and that's why it's a Cash for Kids program right now, and this is going on all throughout the country. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is all throughout the country. We have problems with whatever you call it, CSF, or we call it DCYF, child CPS, whatever it may be. It's all the same, and there's little sort of slight differences, but it's all a Cash for Kids program, and they don't want to stop that money coming through. How easy would it have been for the legislature, which they were doing the right thing when they put the first fund aside for the $100 million, and if there was an independent entity that was looking at all of these cases where they're gathering evidence and all of that, and there isn't any like blood-sucking lawyers that are involved in this that are only trying to do this just to line their pockets. And they're taking most of that money away anyway from the victims. The other piece that's so crazy here, let's not just talk about, the horrific kinds of sexual abuse, right? Let's talk about the physical abuse. We knew that was happening. There was a report that came out. We have that report. And they still turned a blind eye to that. And we know people, of course, Teresa and I have a mutual person that, I'm not going to put their name out there right now, but they were abused there, physically abused. We're talking about choking these kids unconscious. We're talking about crazy physical abuse, broken bones. So it's so much more. So when we're talking about, you've got Representative Weiler that acts like, there could be a portion of these or many of these, he made it sound like, these are all made up. Could there be some? Yes. But it doesn't matter. If you do listen to stories, and I have listened to the NHPR, it's not something that you can just make up. People have specific markings of people that work there and there's also, by the way, there's kind of some people that have left the state that decided that they were going to report, and they were basically told that, they were going to lose their lives if they came forward. So we know it was covered up. We know all of these things, and here we are, that we did it the wrong way, and let the lawyers come in take everything that they needed. I don't know how we could fix that now. You'd have to have some entity break this cabal that is really over this whole entire element. And then the other thing too is our state capped the amount. Unbelievable. You've got Meehan's trial, and if you watch even 15 minutes of it, you'd want to shut it off when he was up at the stand and the stuff that he was talking about. Horrific. I mean, horrific. And the settlement, I think, was like $38 million, but he can't get more than over 400 and something thousand.
They overturned that,
because
Kelley.
we did that as a state.
No, they overturned it. They overturned that in his case.
Oh, they did.
They did. Yeah, he's
All
going
right.
to get $38 million.
Wonderful. And every single dime of that should come.
Mm-hmm.
Kelley, I had
proven in his case.
I had a listener who had a question. It's just House Bill 553, relative to the definition of abuse and neglect and conditions triggering a rebuttable presumption of harm in abuse and neglect cases. What is your take on 553, which actually has, looks like it's got bipartisan sponsorship here? Democrats, Gregg, Grossman, Petrigno, Raymond, and actually state senator, Democrat senators Long and Rosenwald as well, along with Republicans Birdsell, Carson, DeSimone, McMahon, Nelson, and Pearson and Rice as well, too. So it's got some bipartisan support. What's your take on 553?
Yeah, I have no idea right now. I would have to go look at I have a list of all the ones that I'm following. There are some that are, did that have a hearing yet? Do you know?
It's in Children and Family Law Committee right now. That's its current status.
Yeah, some of them are just not good because they basically don't help at all, and so I don't know if that's the other thing that came out. I mean, did you hear the head of Child and Family Law in the House, Representative Pearson, basically said, which is just horrifying. You can look it up. That's everywhere too. That, when we make decision on bills, we don't look at the constitutionality of it. We just are basically going off of our own opinions. Are you freaking kidding me?
You take an oath.
Insane.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, and you had Sharon Packard who took Leah off of the DCY, and you've got the Freemason caucus, which is Weiler and Sherman and some of these individuals that continue over and over and over again to kind of want to just not deal with this issue, and they're making it worse. They're not solving the problem, and they're making it worse. And that's what I called Ken to tell him. We've got to fix the problem. Stop re-victimizing the victims. That's not going to weigh well with a juror.
I think one of the concerns, and especially looking at 553, is the potentiality when changing definitions of offenses, changing definition of abuse. One of the concerns, and I had somebody that just texted me, one of the concerns is that what is the likelihood that a parent facing hardship, a financial, a medical, or personal struggle, could be targeted for child removal rather than being offered support? Words have meanings, obviously. And so if we're changing definitions of what abuse or neglect happens to be, I mean, look at what happened with State Representative J.R. Hull, who had his children targeted because of a vaccine compliance issue. So you have DCYF that's looking at this and saying, well, now this is child abuse because this child's not getting a vaccine. And so now, the children are subject to being removed from the house under the auspices that this is an exigent circumstance that requires state intervention.
There needs to be a jury of our peers in these cases. And that's what the Constitution originally, you bring it forth before a jury to discern and decide if a crime has happened. And we've done away with that. We've let, DCYF be judge, jury, and convictor. And capital punishment of taking a child away from someone. Yes, if a child is being abused, it needs to stop. But we have professionals that can do forensics. We have lie detector tests. We have we have ways to get to the bottom to see if someone is just trying to go for an instant payout or whether they were truly abused.
All right, we're going to jump over to the caller line here. I've got Anthony on the line. Anthony, welcome to Granite State Live. What's on your mind? Anthony, you there? Looks like we're having a technical issue here with Anthony, so we'll get him on as quickly as we can. One of the concerns, I think, Therese, is in the case of an exigent circumstance, it's like a protective order. And I think when it comes to protective orders, when it comes to children, obviously there's the notion that, well, we have to preserve the rights of the person, but we also have to protect the best interests of the child or the minor or somebody who is in a diminished capacity and can't take care of themselves. So at what point do we take somebody away, put them in a temporary crisis care position, so that way they're the investigation, the forensic interviews, the forensic, not a forensic audit, but literally a forensic investigation could take place to determine whether or not the claim is viable or not? It's the same argument that comes up in red flags. Do you confiscate and then do the investigation, or do the investigation and then let the confiscation or the lack of confiscation occur as a result of...
Yes, I'm very familiar with how it currently works, and they do. When in doubt, they go in, the caseworkers, and they remove the child, usually on a Friday night. The thing is, they're not even telling the parent any information. I had, when I was a school nurse, I had a mother who was a divorce situation, dad's living out of his car, child's coming in covered in mosquito bites, but all of a sudden DCYF comes and takes the child. She has no contact with the child for 6 weeks without a single word as to why they removed the child from her. She couldn't get in front of a judge. Come to find out, the ex claimed that her new boyfriend hit the child. Mm-hmm. This mom went for 6 weeks without having any information whatsoever, no contact with her baby. Boom, her baby's just instantly gone. There's got to be some sort of mechanism of fairness. There's got to be an instant court, within 24, 48 hours. Mm-hmm. This is what the claim is. This is what the investigation is. We'll do supervised visits until we figure it out. But you just don't have a child vanish from a parent.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we're talking weeks. That's unreasonable. A 24 or 36 hour get the hearing, to determine what the best course of action is, and to determine the credibility of the allegation as well, too, because we've seen many instances where you have a pissed off parent who uses DCYF, weaponizes the DCYF process to try to get revenge or to punish the other parent. So, I mean, of course, there's the fine line between trying to protect those who need to be protected and making sure that those who are legitimately culpable of criminal activities are held accountable, and preserving the rights of people as well, too. I think we have Anthony back on the line, so let's jump back over to the caller line. Anthony, welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you, Anthony. Thank you.
Okay, listen, I'm on the road. I'm going to pull over 1 second. Hi, Representative Potenza. Hi, Therese. Therese, I supported you when you was running for executive council. I wished you had won. I am a constituent. I'm involved with the Ossipee Patriots, the Wolfboro Patriots, many colleagues that you know, Justin Worthley and Joe Nugent and Rhonda and Kelley. I support everything that you're doing. Keith, I just found out you today, but I just wanted to call in. I'm not sure that it concerns exactly what you're talking about, but my family case involves the fact that my rights were taken away at the beginning of my family case when I exposed that the mom was abusing and that the older siblings were also not only abusing but bullying my minor son. My co-parent went to court asking the court to take my rights away, which the court couldn't do. And then the clerk, referred a lawyer who were actually friends with the judge. And at the beginning of my case, they took my rights away. It took me 4 years to get 50-50. And now that it's already about to be a final hearing, the mom had admitted to abuse and neglect, and I'm still fighting the court about that. 5 DCYF investigations. And so I have my hands full here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anthony, I am so sorry. I have to say, I would get like a dozen of these stories in a day about a year ago, and they continue to come through, I mean, on a daily basis. And it was astonishing to me. The show's going to end here soon. We'll have to wrap up. We could do a whole nother show on this, but only in 2004 was family court even created. And before that, it was all done within the criminal court system. And, we really have to look at what's happening, because it is a hot mess. And the children are the ones, families are being ripped apart. There's no incentive for the cases to be wrapped up in an efficient, quick manner. Anthony, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And yes, we need to elect people into the executive council, because they are the ones that appoint the judges. And, I don't know how else to fix it. And I want this show to always be about finding ways to fix it. And we just have to continue to link arms for liberty and get people that have morals and ethics to take those keys and save this country.
All right, that is going to do it for this Tuesday edition of Granite State Live. I want to thank Paul Terry for jumping on the program, New Hampshire State Representative Kelley Potenza for jumping on the program, all the callers as well, too. Don't forget, you can always catch archived programs on graniterock.com. So what do we got? We got Getter and Cloud Hub, and of course, our friends over at ramtv.live. That's ramtv.live. Next week is going to be a pre-recorded show, so we're not going to be able to do call-ins, but we've got a great program coming up for you next week as well, too. We'll be back live, of course, the following week. Until then, great to have you along. God bless, stay safe, and we'll talk to you next week.
With our first flyer, and just have a spot to say special guest, and as we have them, be able to put them in, and that way when we don't have...
We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.